Today, we're going to talk about some of the most expensive watches ever sold. And some of them will absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about criminal behaviors. We're talking about a watch that was stolen, then retrieved. A long story. It is nuts. Before we get into the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel now. And if you want to buy a watch, sell a watch, something crazy, prideandpain.com. Let's get stuck in the video. We're not swearing in this video due to the fact that I'm currently situated in a church. There's no chronological order in these watches. I'm just going to tell the stories behind all of them. And I'm actually realizing that I'm wearing the wrong watch for this video, so I need to change the watch. Changing my watch to a very special 5271, which is an off-catalog variation of a 5270. And a 5270 has a big relationship with the first watch I want to talk about, which is the Patek Philippe 1518. So Patek Philippe is known for making complicated watches, but the first ever serial production watch that was complicated was the 1518. When the watch was launched, it was quite crazy. It was a perpetual calendar chronograph, meaning it was a chronograph which you can measure time, a stopwatch, right? But it was also a watch that would be able to tell you the day, the date, the day, the month, the year, the leap year, whatever it is, right? But it was the first ever serial production complication of Patek Philippe. Patek Philippe made those complicated watches before, but they only made it on special order from someone famous or important. The 1518 was first introduced in 1941 and absolutely broke the internet. There wasn't any internet. It's not even funny. The 1518 was first introduced in 1941 and held its production till 1954. And 281 examples were ever produced. 55 of those were produced in pink/rose gold. Only 4 of them have been produced in steel. This is not just the start of Patek Philippe's mainstream serial production, because this was the first ever serial production chronograph perpetual calendar, but also the first ever serial production complicated watch Patek Philippe ever produced. So it's a part of Patek Philippe's history. Now, you need to think about a watch that was only produced 4 times, only in steel. And one of those 4 watches was brought to auction in 2016 and was sold for a whooping $11.1 million. That's insane. In 2026, 10 years after that, I would say that number would be average. All of that will become clear later in the video, because some of the watches we're going to talk about are absolutely insane. Someone paid $11.1 million for a piece of history, basically a piece of the DNA of Patek Philippe. We're also talking about a watch that was produced 80 years ago. How many of those watches do you think are still left in the world? I don't think very many. Watch number 2 is made by a jewelry house. I would say the reason why Jacob & Co exists, well, basically Jacob & Co is like the Wish.com variation of this jewelry house. This is pure luxury and pure jewelry. We're talking, of course, about Graf. And in this case, we're talking about 2 watches. First off, it's the Graf Hallucination, which was launched in 2014. And I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't have called this a watch in the first place. But when it was launched in 2014, it was valued at $55 million, which I think is more a guesswork type of valuation rather than a really accurate valuation. I think it's more marketing than anything else. But the reason why they were so expensive was the stones used. To give you an idea, when Graf launched the Hallucination in 2014, it mentioned it took them 2 years to produce this watch. Now, the reason wasn't the complication of the watch, because it was just a simple quartz movement, but it was the sourcing of the stones used. 110 carats of colored diamonds. I mean, colored diamonds are expensive, and Graf is known for being the house with the most expensive and the best diamonds in the world. As well as that, 50% of the stones were between 2 and 3 carats. That's crazy, because a 2 carat pink or a 2 carat or even a 3 carat colored diamond is extremely rare and expensive, making the Hallucination an insane watch. Then in 2015, they introduced another watch, which was the Graf Fascination, a watch covered in 152 carats of white diamonds. One of the reasons why this watch is valued as high as it is, and although they're flawless white diamonds, which is really expensive, it had one feature. You could actually hide the watch with a center stone, a pear-shaped decolored center stone of 38.13 carat. That is the highest of the highest quality ever in any diamond of any carat. That watch was valued at $40 million and introduced in 2015. Graph had back-to-back years in 2014 and 2015 where they launched one of the most expensive watches ever created. Do I think they're a watch? Nah. I would consider it more a piece of jewelry with a timekeeping device. You can now win your own expensive watch. And this is because I've partnered with Vanadum. Vanadum is a family-run, veteran-owned business that is offering you the chance to win this incredible Glashütte 70s chronograph. Grab one of the limited edition collectibles, like the Nico Leonard collectibles, and you're automatically entered into the draw to win this incredible watch. You winning this watch won't last forever. I would recommend you to be quick. First link in the description now, and thank you so much, Vanadum, for not just doing an incredible job, but also supporting me and our army of incredible people. To make sure you don't miss out, please enter before July 23rd, 2026 at 11:59 PST. PM, of course, end of the day, like it's not 12 o'clock. Pause the video, be fast, have a look. Do this now, yeah? Thank you. Watch number 4, yet again produced by Patek Philippe. What I'm gonna say here sounds stupid, but watch number 4 was sold in 2014 on auction for $24 million. Now thinking about this, when making this video, it sounds cheap as hell, because this was, for more than half a century, the most complicated, the most expensive, not most expensive, because there's more expensive watches on this list. Like, it's actually crazy to think that I'm gonna say $24 million for this piece in 2014 is cheap, because for half a century, this was the most complicated watch ever produced. This wasn't a collector, a guy that bought a watch. This guy wanted to have the daddy watch, the upper watch, the watch that watched them all. In this case, I'm talking about the Patek Philippe Henry Graves Jr.'s watch. It was a watch that he commissioned. Who was Henry Graves? He was a wealthy American banker. To go back to the first watch we talked about, Patek Philippe only produced complicated watches on order or for people that were wealthy or important. In 1925, Henry Graves commissioned Patek Philippe to make him the most complicated watch ever created. It took Patek Philippe 8 years to produce that watch, and it was a watch with 24 complications. It was a pocket watch known as the Mac Daddy of all the watches ever. And for half a century, it was the most complicated watch ever created. It's the era of mechanical, manual. They didn't have computers. They didn't have calculators. They couldn't use a CAT scanner. This watch wasn't just groundbreaking at the time. If that watch is being produced today, it is still groundbreaking. There wasn't a watch on the planet, not even made by Breguet, not even made for a royal family, not made for anyone, that combined all these complications and finished it like Patek Philippe did. They actually delivered a watch in 1933, and I do not know how much was paid for the watch at the time. What I do know is that that watch on auction in 2014 fetched $24 million. The current owner of this watch is unknown. I would say unknown. I actually believe, and there's rumors around this, that the watch is currently within the Al Thani family and the royal family of Qatar. Only in 1989, Patek Philippe produced a watch that was more complicated. That was to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Patek Philippe. That was an insane gap. Next watch I want to talk about is, of course, the Paul Newman Rolex Daytona, reference number 639. The Rolex Daytona is probably the most famous Rolex ever produced. If not, it is the most important Rolex ever produced. And Paul Newman was the icon, was basically the unofficial, not official, not paid for influencer of Rolex. Right, the Rolex Daytona, there's a lot of people that know about the Rolex Daytona today. But the Rolex Daytona finds its history starting in 1963. And it was in a complete different shape as it is today. Today's form of the Rolex Daytona took shape from 1988, the year after I was born. I want to particularly talk about the 1963 era. It's the era of mechanical, manual, and chronograph. The Rolex Daytona is called the Rolex Daytona, but prior to its name Daytona, it was supposed to be called Le Mans. And Rolex has officially confirmed that with the launch of the Rolex Daytona Le Mans in recent years, which is a very limited number produced special edition Rolex Daytona. As well as that, in that era, Rolex made a lesser watch than Omega. The Speedmaster was miles ahead of its competition and also therefore became the first watch worn on the moon. moon. There was a specific dial configuration, which we call the Paul Newman dial, because that was the watch that Paul Newman wore. And that configuration became the most collectible and most valuable configuration of the Rolex Daytona. When the actual OG Paul Newman watch came on auction, that shocked the entire world. That watch was in the end sold for $17.8 million in 2019. And I remember that if it was yesterday, because that was in a real start of my career. That was just before I started YouTube, but I actually worked for auction houses where I did valuations and authentications. And I was there in the midst of it. And I actually held that exact watch in my hands. And I had it on my wrist. So I didn't close it, but I had it lying on my wrist. It was unbelievable. I think it's time to start with some controversy, and I need to be very careful how I'm going to word this, because these guys like to sue very, very fast. We're talking about a wristwatch that was sold for $31 million in 2019. It was a piece unique made by Patek Philippe called the Only One. The Grandmaster Chain 6300, which we talked about earlier, was a watch that was only made in precious metal. The Only project was a charity project auction series to support charities. What this meant is manufacturers would donate a watch, a one-off, to this auction, and the auction would sell this. They got the big boys on board. They got Patek on board, they got Audemars Piguet, they got all the big boys on board. The last one fetched a lot of controversy because we do not know allegedly where all the funds went. Well, in 2019, one watch was sold for $31 million, which was the Patek Philippe Grandmaster Chain 6300, named the Only One. And the Only One refers to that this is the only one ever produced in steel. So it was identical to the 6300 normal, which would be worth around $5 million. I think it retailed at about $3 million, but this is the only one ever produced in steel. Now, steel and Patek Philippe have a special relationship because steel Pateks, in this case the 1518, the first watch we discussed, was extremely rare. Every steel Patek is always extremely rare. By the Aquanaut and Nautilus, nonsense. But very highly complicated watches made in steel are extremely special. Let me put it this way, reference number 5212, which is a weekly calendar, was the first ever new complication Patek Philippe has launched in steel rather than precious metal. Normally, they introduced a new function or a new complication in precious metal first. With the 1518, it was steel first. I'm actually expecting that watch to come out very soon in precious metal, but we're not talking about that today. We are talking about a watch that sold for $31 million, the Grandmaster Chain. The Only One. Nobody knows who bought it. I would love to know where it is. The watch hasn't been spotted since. $31 million. In 2023, the 10th edition of the Only Project auction was going to be live. It was overshadowed by a lot of controversy, and a lot of people started asking questions. This auction was later cancelled and was moved to 2024, and that is still today the last time the Only Project had an auction. It was crazy because I always looked forward to the watches because every single brand of any form of notoriety always submitted and donated a piece unique to this auction. On the last variation, some brands actually pulled out, including AP. That is big. Several brands demanded the watch back. They wanted clarity where the funds went. And that is still today the last auction, 2 years ago. Watch number 7, I never believed in. And I need to give my defeat. I was wrong. This watch was sold this year, 2026, for a whopping $14 million, well, approaching $14 million. It was from a watchmaker, François Paul Journe. Let me explain. François Paul Journe is a wee bit of a rock and roller, right? He loves a wee drink. He pissed off a good few collectors, right, with his behavior.
There's some words on the street that big collectors went out for dinner with him, and he kind of misbehaved. I wouldn't want to buy an FP Journe today, because say it comes out that François is a mad and he's done things he shouldn't be doing, your asset, that watch brand, will drop like an absolute stone.
A lot of people bought FP Journe to speculate on, and I thought it was very dangerous with someone that was a wee bit of a rock and roller. Well, last couple of years, I haven't heard any crazy stories anymore, and let me tell you, if there's a crazy story, I will hear about it. But we cannot deny that he is probably still top 2, 3 best watchmaker alive. But his early work was crazy. The resonance was crazy. The resonance is very expensive. Watch normal resonance can go for like a couple of $100,000. That's not the point. What I'm trying to say is here, this particular watch was offered to those who bought François Paul Journe's Tourbillon. We called it a subscription, right? I think it was 20 or 25. Either one of them, don't shoot me in the comments. And several of those numbers, 001, 003, 18 were all offered on auction, right? And they all fetched all crazy numbers. 4 million, 3 million, 2 million, 7 million, like crazy numbers back in the day. But this year, number 007 fetched $14 million. It's crazy. We never expected this to happen. And I actually remember an article, and it must have been 10 years ago, of Ben Clymer from Houdinki, seeing that some of the early Francois Paul Jouin starting to get collectible on auctions, but on the open market, you could buy them below retail. It was really weird. And today, that's just unheard of. That watch was maybe sold for, I don't know, 70, 60, 80,000 Swiss franc. That watch was sold at $14 million. This was only offered to the people who supported Francois Paul Jouin at the really, really beginning. I don't see these watches dropping any, like this is just, the floodgates are open now. People that spend that amount of money don't ever need to sell that watch. So that watch will always increase in value. It's just nuts. I stand by what I said. However, I was wrong with the values. People like a wee bit of rock and rolling. To be fair, me too. Watch number 8, the last watch. A lot of controversy. That watch is currently displayed in the Museum of Art, the Islamic Museum of Art in Israel, which I find quite controversial in general. If you're gonna make any political comments under this video, you will have a bad sex life for the rest of your life. If you don't have a sex life at all, then it will give you bad karma for the rest of your life. This video is about the watch, not about any political view. The Breguet Marie Antoinette 160. Marie Antoinette was probably the most influential woman of its time, maybe still today, because we still talk about it today. And Breguet was the best watchmaker in the world at the time, and still today, created the most important watches ever created, including the tourbillon movement. There's an insane story behind this watch, because although it is currently in display in a museum with the Solomon collection, which is interesting, we'll put a link somewhere. Dr. David Lionel Solomon was a mad Breguet collector, and his watches are currently on display. I think there's over 100 watches on display in that museum. I'm a wee bit worried that they're currently in a war zone, and I would like not that to happen, because yeah, that would be a bit shit. Anyway, the order was placed, the commission started in 1783, and there was no budget. Whatever it takes, how much it is, it doesn't matter, this watch has to be made, and it needs to be the Mac Daddy. 10 years after the watch was commissioned, because the work started in 1783, and Marie Antoinette was executed. The French Revolution started about 6 years after she commissioned the watch, and she was executed in 1793, meaning she was never able to receive the watch. However, the French Revolution is also the reason why Breguet left France, because Louis Breguet and the Breguet Watch Company was French, and they moved to Switzerland after the French Revolution. This watch is actually really historically massively important, and also one of the reasons why Breguet moved from France to Switzerland. And there wasn't any pressure from the outset to finish this watch. In 1809, Louis Breguet resumed the project, which he has never been able to finish. He spent over 280 days every single year on this watch. He has never been able to complete it because he passed away in 1823. For then his son to finish this watch 44 years after it was commissioned in 1827. There's a blank spot between 1827 and 1889 because nobody knows what happened with that watch in between. Keep in mind that watch was valued at $30 million. This is remaining one of the maddest mysteries in the watch industry, or the Breguet brand, because the first documented service of that watch was apparently in 1838, about 11 years after the watch was finished. But there wasn't any documentation of this watch being sold. There was another real long period where this watch disappeared until it reappeared in 1887, when it was bought for £600 by Sir Spencer Burton. From 1887 to early 1900s, the watch swapped hands a few times until it ended up in the hands of one of the biggest Breguet collectors in the world, Sir David Lionel Solomon. And when in 1925 Sir David actually passed away, his entire collection was donated to a museum, the Islamic Art Museum, Jerusalem, Israel. You would think, oh, it's now in a museum, story ends, all good and well. Yeah, well, it doesn't, because in 1983 that watch got stolen, but 106 watches were stolen, and only in the early 2000s this was brought back to the museum. So the guy that stole the watches hid them. He never sold them. He hid them. He just wanted to own them. He hid them in safety deposit boxes all over the world. Absolutely crazy. The madness of this is nobody would ever expect to see that watch ever again, the Marie Antoinette 160. Nobody ever expected that. And because of that, in the early 2000s, Breguet started a project to recreate that watch, which they finished. But we call that watch the 1160. I don't know where the 1160 is, but the Marie Antoinette 160, one of the most famous watches in the world, is currently still in Jerusalem, Israel, in the Islamic Art Museum. It is insane, and I wish I would go there to see that watch. For me, watches are so much more than just objects of luxury. There's stories behind every watch. It's about the stories of the watches that matter. It's a connection with history that I love so much, and that's what I love about this Marie Antoinette 160. It's just absolutely amazing, and that's why I love watches so much.